What's going on, hockey friends? It is so good to be back, and today we have a very interesting topic. With the NHL Global Series wrapping up last week in Stockholm, we once again get the eternal debate of whether the NHL should expand to the European continent or not. So in this video, I will outline why I think it wouldn't work and why it shouldn't even be attempted at all. But then I'll go against what I say and actually draw up a small plan of what countries and cities would be awarded an NHL franchise. But that comes later. Let's first start off with why it wouldn't work to begin with. So the reasoning behind me saying it's not possible is quite simple. You can't go into these European markets and expect to steal fans from the already established teams. And that's the main point. That's it. Video's done. Thanks for watching. No, but seriously, you can argue the revenue part and the TV deals would bring in a lot of money and people would attend these games and buy merchandise, at least in the beginning, and this would of course bring in a lot of money. There's no denying that, and the NHL loves their money, and if they can maximize their revenue, then they would of course give that a shot. Another question is if the NHL would even consider heading into the European market. If we set aside all the logistical problems that immediately arise, such as scheduling and travel, would they even want to set foot in Europe on a permanent basis? No, and that's something Gary Bettman himself has dismissed. During the Global Series in Stockholm, Bettman was interviewed by Viaplay and said the following, quote, "We want to be good citizens in the hockey world and we don't want to undermine or compete with the existing framework." He also elaborated saying that the SHL, for example, wouldn't be too happy if the NHL came in and put franchises in their market, and it's something they respect. And say what you want about Mr. Bettman, but he's completely spot on here. The European hockey market is so different from the NHL, both in terms of how the leagues operate, with promotions and relegations in almost every country, but for me, the most important difference, or factor rather, is the fan culture. It's like two different worlds, and for someone like me, I've experienced a lot of games both in the NHL and in Europe, and I mean, it's so different. In Europe, you're an active part of the game, you clap along, you sing along, you immerse yourself almost as much in the atmosphere as you do in the game. Whereas in the NHL, the fan has a more passive role, and that's not to say NHL fans are less loyal or attached to their teams. There are some fantastic fan bases, but that's my point. In Europe, these teams already have that loyal fan base, and if they have an interest in the NHL, because not every hockey fan in Europe does, but if they do, they probably have an NHL team that they are attached to. So the market for fan bases for 8 new teams is something I realistically can't see existing. You can't expect to steal fans from Djurgården or Eisbären Berlin or Davos or Slovan Bratislava. These teams already have loyal fans, and so does every other team in their league and in the leagues below, and so on and so on. So I think the point is pretty clear, and it's something I'll come back to when we list the 8 cities. The fans will already be occupied with their own teams, and if the choice to either go see their own team or an NHL franchise that has no connection to the city, the answer will be pretty obvious to most people. Another question mark would be where? Like physically where? Where would these teams play? Are you going to build new arenas for all of these teams? Some of the cities I will be listing will have empty arenas that aren't in use, but take the O2 Arena in Prague for example. That's a really nice arena, but it's home to Sparta Prague, so from a logistical point of view, are you going to host 2 hockey teams, and on top of that, concerts and other events? Without knowing the operation schedule of the O2 Arena, I think it's going to be a pretty packed and stressful schedule. One thing that people may point to as an argument for a European division is the interest in the NHL Global Series, and I can see the point. The tickets for those games sell out immediately, and they're quite pricey as well, but there's a few things I think people need to take into consideration. The first thing is, like I already mentioned, European hockey fans will have their own teams in Europe. Let's take the Global Series that just happened in Stockholm for example. Loads of Swedes went to these games, and I'm willing to wager that 90% of them are attached to a Swedish team. What brought them to this event is most likely the fact that they're a fan of one of the 4 teams that came to Stockholm. I mean, look at the teams that came, especially Ottawa, Toronto and Detroit. What did these teams have in common? They've all had Swedish legends captaining these teams and have had a superstar Swede on their roster in the last 5 or 10 years. I mean, it's not a coincidence. These teams are some of the most popular in Sweden, and that has been a consistent pattern with the Global Series. When they went to Finland, they brought Rantanen and Laine. When they went to the Czech Republic, they brought Tomas Hertl. And the same season they had a preseason game in Switzerland with Roman Josi. They know what they're doing and it's smart. But unless they can create a scenario where the NHL and all the owners and all the GMs and everyone is okay with giving up their foreign superstars to these new franchises so the NHL can grow this European division, that's never gonna happen, and this scenario would never happen, of course. So in short, it's not gonna happen, both from a logistical and a fan point of view. But this is where it gets fun, because let's say it does happen, the NHL will expand to Europe with 8 new teams in 8 different cities. What would that look like? I mean, this is always fun, drawing up scenarios and putting teams in cities that don't have a team, and I've done that before with a potential Arizona relocation, but now we're doing Europe. So let me present the 8 cities that the NHL will expand to. Starting off with Stockholm, Sweden. And here's a curveball, and I'll come back to it. We're not going to Helsinki, we're going to Tampere in Finland. Then we're going to Köln or Cologne in Germany. Then we're going to Prague in the Czech Republic, Bratislava in Slovakia. For the UK, I'm going London. Could have gone Manchester or Belfast, but I think London is probably the best here, and I'll come back to that. Then we're also putting a team in Riga to secure the Baltic region, and Latvia is hockey crazy. And lastly, we're heading to Switzerland, to Zurich. So of course we're gonna miss out on some markets, and even if we were in a stable geopolitical situation, I don't think the NHL would consider going to Russia. Simply because I don't see Russia allowing that to happen. They want to create their own league to compete with the NHL. That's why they're trying to hold on to Matvei Michkov for as long as possible, and before the war, trying to expand further into Europe with Jokerit in Finland, for example. Alright, so let's go over these 8 cities and their arenas and if they would work or not. Starting off with Stockholm, this team will play in the Avicii Arena, also known as the Globe. It's a really cool arena, it just hosted the Global Series and it seats almost 14,000 people. Obviously, Stockholm is home to Djurgården and AIK, but they play next door in a smaller arena. Stockholm is a big city and I think the NHL would be desperate to expand to this city. But this will be a reoccurring thing. Hockey fans in Stockholm will already be attached to a local and established team. And so will the other fans in the region close to Stockholm, they will have their own teams. And this is also true for almost every city. We could have gone to Malmö here as well, because the proximity to Copenhagen, and there's a really nice arena in Malmö, but I think Stockholm is the better option here. Heading over to Finland and to Tampere and not to Helsinki, and I'm gonna need my Finnish viewers here to help me out. But from what I gather, the Hartwall Arena, as it was formerly known as, is not in use anymore and is at risk of being demolished. Please help me out in the comments, but anyway, Tampere and the Nokia Arena will be my Finnish NHL franchise. The arena is very new and modern and has also hosted the Global Series along with the 2023 World Championships. It seats 13,500 spectators. The issue here is that Tampere is a relatively small city, but I think it's a more interesting choice. Obviously Helsinki is the logical pick, but whatever. Heading south down to Köln or Cologne, we find the Lanxess Arena, whatever, arena that seats over 18,000 people. We could have gone to Berlin or to Mannheim because they are good hockey cities as well, but Cologne is a big city with a really big, nice arena that I think would work great. And it hosted the World Championships in 2017. Also, Cologne is a big city that would draw a big crowd as well. Then we head east to Prague and the O2 Arena, which I've already talked about a bit. Prague is obviously the biggest city in the Czech Republic and it seats over 17,000 people. Next to Prague and the Czech Republic, we find Slovakia and Bratislava, which is home to the Ondrej Nepela Arena, which is the smallest on this list, just over 10,000 seats, and in 2019 it hosted the World Championships. For the UK, I ended up going with London, but I wrestled with Manchester a bit too because they have a bigger arena and Manchester is more central in the UK. But London is bigger, and I think this team would be the one that draws in the most new fans. They would play at Wembley Arena, not the stadium but Wembley Arena, which would seat around 11 to 12,000 people. London is obviously a huge city, and I think there's a bit of an interest here. I think there are a lot of potential new fans here that would get into hockey as a result of an expansion. Given that the UK probably has the smallest group of hockey fans out of these 8 countries I've picked, obviously there are a lot of competing sports in London. You have football or soccer, you have rugby, cricket, and even the NFL has a round in London. But I think the market is big enough to still create an interest and draw big crowds if the results are going well. Then we head over to Riga in Latvia, and this might be out of left field, but I don't know. Latvia is a hockey crazy country, Riga is the biggest city, and their arena seats just over 10,000 people. I mean, I just think this would be a cool pick. And lastly, we have to have a Swiss team, and I gave Zurich the franchise. There are a lot of good options in Switzerland. There's Davos, Bern, Geneva, but Zurich is a big city with an arena that seats over 12,000 people. Bern has the coolest arena by far though, but I don't think the city is big enough. So, a list of 8 cities where maybe 2 have an arena big enough to satisfy the NHL, so that will probably play a part as well. But you know what? These are just fun thought experiments, and we're just having fun here. Like I said, I don't see the NHL ever expanding into Europe on a permanent basis. We might see more games in Europe, and I'm not against that. A lot of European hockey fans follow the NHL and want to see the best players in the world, and they want to see their NHL stars in their home country. You know, you want to bring Pasternak to the Czech Republic. You just saw what William Nylander did in Sweden. I mean, he's a superstar in Sweden now. But anyways, that's enough rambling from me, guys. Let's keep the conversation going in the comments below. Pitch me some other cities that you would like to see, because I can't possibly name 50 cities, because that would make this video 5 hours long. But anyways, if you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.